Okay, clip number 9. Extended writing. These are 8-mark questions. There will be 3 of them on this paper. They will each carry 8 marks. They will each be at the end of the main question 1, 2 and 3. One of them will have 4 extra marks on. That is for spelling, punctuation and grammar. I think in this paper it was development dynamics, but it will tell you which one has got it on. Not all of them have, only one of them. Now, in reality, you need a good 10 minutes to actually attempt these and do them justice. They are all marked in the same way. Out of the 8 marks, there are 4 marks for what we call knowledge and understanding, and there are 4 marks for what we call application. Now, in sort of pupil speak, what does that mean? Knowledge and understanding means I know some stuff, I have learned some stuff. During my time in GCSE geography, I can remember some stuff. Facts, figures, dates, I can explain it, I can explain the processes, or I know what's going on here. Application is the more tricky bit. Application is responding to the command word. It involves thinking and having an opinion and almost justifying your thoughts and ideas about what you've been asked to write about. The command words are always, or so far what we've seen, they're always one of 2. They are either evaluate, or a bit later on, I believe on it, that one was evaluate, and the third one was assess. Okay, so somebody actually came up with something slightly different. Now, where do you start with these? There are no resources, so there's nothing to worry about in terms of quoting anything, but I think the most important thing with any extended writing question, they're very wordy, they're not particularly well written in my opinion, they confuse, evaluate and assess, but ignore me on my high horse, go back to what you've got to do. The most important thing when you read this is to find the bit of geography that you have been studying. Okay, now in this example here, it's tropical cyclone. I must write about a tropical cyclone. If I do not write about a tropical cyclone, and I write about what I had for my tea last night, or I write about an earthquake, because I'm in hazardous earth, I'm going to get 0. Okay, so identify the section of geography that you have studied. The second thing to look for is exactly what, because I've just narrowed it down to tropical cyclone, but do I want everything to do with tropical cyclones? If I read the question again, all I really want is the responses to tropical cyclone. Okay, so I don't really want to know what caused it. I don't really want to know about the impacts of the tropical cyclone. I have to write about the responses to a tropical cyclone. Okay, now for some people that might be as far as they can get. They might be able to pick up 3 or 4 marks just by writing about responses to tropical cyclones. Okay, showing that they do know something, they have learnt something. We're aiming for the top here, so I've got to go back to the rest of the question. The third thing to look for is an example. We have, or you should have, studied these things in depth. So in class, you should have looked at 2 tropical cyclones. My group, we did Haiyan and we did Katrina. Katrina was our USA example, Haiyan was our Philippines example. Katrina is clearly United States of America, therefore it is a developed country. Okay, I need to write about Hurricane Katrina, United States of America, that particular hurricane, what happened afterwards, what were the responses. Okay, it's geography, we study places, we study real things. Please don't write a generic waffly response about what you could do to respond. You could evacuate, you could rebuild the seawall, you could rebuild the buildings, because it's just waffle. It's what I call anytime, any place, anywhere examples. Okay, they're not going to get you into that higher level 5, 6, 7 or even an 8, because you've got to make sure that you're hitting this knowledge and understanding. You have learnt your case studies. If you haven't learnt your case studies, there's not a fat lot I can do about that. Now, the last thing that you've also got to think about in the question is the command word, the application. Evaluate. if I'm evaluating something, I'm kind of saying what worked, what didn't work, and this is what they could have done, or this is what they should have done. Okay? I've now decoded the question, so rather than this sort of mess of words rammed together in a big sentence that I'm struggling to understand what it means, I know I've got to write about a tropical cyclone, the responses to it, and I'm going to use Hurricane Katrina as an example. Now, the next thing I think to think about before you do anything in this case study is actually just have a think about, well, now what were the responses? I need 2 to 3 half-decent ideas. So I seem to remember something about after the hurricane had happened, there was a second evacuation. There were hundreds of thousands of people left in New Orleans, and they tried to evacuate again who was left and move them out because the situation was just descending into chaos. I also seem to remember something about afterwards, another response was they rebuilt the coastal levees, they rebuilt the seawalls because that was part of the problem with this particular hurricane. It was so bad because they hadn't been maintained properly. So I've got 2 fairly decent, oh, I've got a third one. I seem to remember they called the army in. They had to because people had started shooting each other. So I've got 3 fairly decent thoughts there that I'm just going to store up there by the question. Okay? Structure. I need to start with an introduction. Okay? It's only going to be 2 lines long, and it's going to be pretty much along the lines of, I'm going to write about the tropical cyclone Hurricane Katrina that hit the United States of America in whatever date it was, and that has actually escaped my memory right now. This was a developed country. I'm going to look at the responses to it, full stop. I could add a little bit more detail in about this was a category 3 tropical cyclone with a storm surge of 5 metres. 2 lines, no more. But it's very, very clever because you could automatically pick up some marks on knowledge and understanding. Your paragraph has to show that you know and you've learned and you can understand and explain things about whichever response you're writing about. So if I was talking about rebuilding seawalls, I'd have to explain, well, why did they have to rebuild the seawalls? Because they hadn't been maintained properly. They weren't high enough to cope with storm surge. But I've also, in that paragraph, got to make sure that I'm getting some application in. I am talking about what worked, what was effective, what wasn't effective, what could actually have been improved. Okay, so each of those 2, maximum 3 responses has to show a bit of both. Be prepared to say something, don't be scared just because it's geography, to use quite emotive language. The example that they gave us, which was actually a response to this question, was talking about for a rich country that was inadequate or this was unacceptable, and they classed that as being evaluation. Finally, if you're aiming for a 7 or an 8, you have to do some kind of conclusion, and this is where your application really has to shine through. Okay, in that you're showing a much deeper understanding and thinking about the question. So I always sort of think of, is it to do with levels of development? Are the differences to do with changes in spatial pattern? Are they to do with changes in temporal pattern, changes in time? Think about long term, short term, okay, as ways of getting into that question. But really, in the conclusion, it's going to be no more than 2 to 3 lines, and it really is your own thoughts and opinions that need to shine through there. You've obviously got to justify and back up what you're saying. You can't just say, Katrina was dreadful because I am right. You must have some kind of geographical thinking and understanding behind what you've actually written. Now, just a quick word on, this one here. It's India, it's development dynamics, clearly it's India because it says named emerging country. Evaluate the impact of globalisation on the economy. Okay, now anything that says how far or to what extent or evaluate the impact is obviously kind of implying to me that there is a positive impact, but there must also be a negative impact as well. So don't be afraid to sort of draw that into your answer. The other thing to mention with this one is the spag at the top, it tells you in shouty bold letters, there are 4 extra marks here available for spelling, punctuation and grammar. If you basically do full stops in capital letters and get commas in the right places, and I can read it, it'll get 2. It'll get 2 out of 4. Okay? If what you write is not relevant, so you're asked about a named emerging country and you decide to write about, I don't know, an earthquake that you have studied, it will get 0. It doesn't matter how good your literacy is, if what you've written in the body of your answer isn't relevant, it will get 0. How do I move, on the other hand, that from a 2 to a 4? Well, there's several things that you can do here. You've obviously got to think about geographical terminology. So instead of writing, building roads or building hospitals, use the word infrastructure instead of farming, agriculture. So you've got to try and get as much geographical terminology into your response as you can, and I always go with a bit of showy-offy punctuation. Yeah, a few colons, a few semicolons, a few hyphens. It really has to be, for a 3 or a 4, I am definitely looking for paragraphs. Dead giveaways in terms of literacy is stuff like this. India hasn't got a capital letter. Okay? It should get marked down. Capital letters on countries and names of places are absolutely essential. Think about other terminology, especially on development dynamics, energy resources, TNCs, trade balance, imports, exports. Perfectly acceptable to use acronyms if you're going to use capital letters. Okay? These are difficult and sometimes they require a bit of thinking about, because it's not always obvious what you've actually got to write about. The last example here for a named megacity, assess the different strategies to improve sustainability. Okay? Where's the geography? Sustainability. Megacity, Mumbai. What have they done to improve sustainability? Has it worked or not? See, I think they've confused assess and evaluate here. In fact, on this year's exam paper, whether you'd responded to assess or evaluate in the wrong way, they were giving you credit for it. Evaluate to me says what worked, what didn't, what could they have improved. Assess is make a judgment. What was best, what was not, what was, if I had to put things in a rank order, that's what assessment means. However, the questions weren't particularly well written. I think they confused the command words themselves, so either way, you got credit for it. Now, whether that will happen or not this year, I honestly don't know. So I would stick to what Mrs. also has told you. Evaluate means what worked, what didn't, what could be improved upon. Assess is make a judgment, put things in an order, and justify why you've put things in an order. Okay? That is about as bad as it gets in terms of questions. I think the 8-mark one, and to be honest, I thought this year's 8-mark questions looked a lot more straightforward and reasonable than some of the rather vague ones we've had on the specimen exam papers.